Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb, and this is sponsored by the Indiana Women's Action Movement. We have so much to talk about today because we have the deep knowledge with us of LGBTQ issues housed here in the brain of Chris Paulsen. So she is the executive director of Indiana Youth Group. And so, Chris, I would like first for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your organization, because it, is got a long history.
It does. So I'm Chris Paulsen. I use she, her pronouns. And I am honored to have served as CEO of Indiana Youth Group for the past 4 years. Indiana Youth Group is the longest serving LGBTQ youth group in the nation, housed right here in Indiana. We have been around since 1987. So this is our 34th year. And we serve LGBTQ youth and their straight ally friends ages 12 to 24. We run the largest rapid rehousing program for LGBTQ youth in Indianapolis currently. That's a program we started about 9 months ago. So that is, we're now housing youth experiencing homelessness. We also work in schools. We oversee the Gender and Sexuality Alliances in all Indiana schools. We do work around basic needs, youth that are experiencing generational poverty, mental health work, anything that a LGBTQ youth would need to feel safe in Indiana.
Wow, that's just amazing and great work and such a long history. And I think everyone kind of acknowledges that in this country anyway, the rights of LGBTQ plus community members has just changed so quickly. Watching Barack Obama, do a 180 just during the several years that he was president was really an awakening happening. So I think that's great, but you kind of precede that by so many years, which is wonderful. So here in Indiana, of course, we have the dubious distinction of being the state of RFRA, and that's where this kind of current collision is happening. And that's what I want to talk about. And particularly, it's happening in education. So there's several things that are really just very active right now that I hope you can give us some insight into. And of course, one of the things is the lawsuit brought by two LGBTQ community members who sued religious educational organizations for I think one was breach and one was a breach of contract. One was a Title VII case for who they loved and being dismissed once that became public knowledge. So I want to talk about that because that is so important, that the impact of that case, it's going to set crazy precedents. And of course, what's happening in that case now is really kind of a result of that whole RFRA movement. It's the superseding rights of religion to human rights, civil rights, employment rights of individuals. So, and that's like, we were so excited to have that as RFRA in our state, and then have this pathetic, fix to RFRA, which really didn't fix anything. And apparently it's just gone, from bad to worse now. And then the other issue that's really coming up now is another education issue. So the first one were employment and education. Now, the other one now is this real, it's hard to get your head around this movement that's happening now, trying to create something that isn't a problem and make it a problem in education. I think there is this long-standing strategy to take over education by religious extremists, and to create that as the predominant education, and of course using religious theories that are just not acceptable. So, okay, so I'll stop talking. I want you to talk. So tell us about those two issues. I know you know a lot about it. So just tell us, so whichever one you think is easier to talk about first, better to talk about first, tell us what's going on.
Well, you brought up the religious schools first, so I'll jump into that one. Yeah, I think something that when these schools get rid of long standing employees for who they love, they don't take into account the students. Those guidance counselors had been there decades and had helped generations of students become who they really are, support them so they can move through their educational path, so they can become, get good jobs and become productive members of society. And then all of a sudden, because they're honest about who they are and who they love, that not only is the job taken away from those counselors, but those counselors are taken away from the youth. So for an organization that says they support youth, to fire someone because they're truthful about who they are does not support youth at all. We know that there's dozens of LGBTQ youth that go to those schools. And all of a sudden they were told to their faces, you don't matter. Your life is not important. Our doctrine is more important than who you really are. And you should not be honest about who you really are. And I think that's something that I assume educators go into education because they want to support youth and make youth lives better.
Yeah.
But when you do things like that, you're doing the exact opposite. Those students were told you don't matter, and what you know to be the truth doesn't matter to us. So I think that's something that the church and a lot of places are grappling with. It's a balancing act, and unfortunately, they're pushing the wrong doctrine right now. They should be seeing how they can support youth and not how they can just keep pushing their doctrine. So I think we have to really look at that. Like, do we want to support youth or don't we? Because you can't say you do and then fire someone for being honest about who they are.
Yeah, that's been such a historical theme of being in the LGBTQ community, and that is being authentic. And that's the struggle. That's always been the struggle. And it looks like this is what the church wants. They want you to, not be authentic. And, people can't live like that. They just can't live like that. I wonder if you know anything about students' response to this case, if there's any, movement afoot among young people, because I'm sure too, young people, like they don't even get why this is a controversy anymore. Young people are so accepting of the LGBTQ community, they don't even get it. They don't even get that there's any struggle. And so I wonder how, if you've heard what the response is among youth.
Yeah, and actually when the first counselor was fired, Shelley Fitzgerald, the students formed a group called Shellys Voice to fight back. And Indiana Youth Group is a fiduciary agent for Shellys Voice. And we've worked with those youth to make their voices heard because they felt so unheard. They were told they didn't matter. So we've been working with them to help their voices be heard. And, they are powerful and they are the future leaders. So I know that they will change the world. The church has been around for a long time, so it's not something that happens quickly. But they are continuing to push and to make changes and to support the students that are still in those schools. They need to know that they are supported by both teachers and parents and alumni. So those students that were there and have since graduated are still pushing to make sure that the youth in those schools know that they're valued.
That's wonderful. And, there's also, unfortunately, this long history of just damage that the Catholic Church and other churches have done to the LGBTQ community, in terms of, just self-hatred and that that just cannot stand.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's,
think we also need to recognize that there's churches that are trying to fix that. So it's not that all churches are bad, definitely. There's churches that do accept LGBTQ people, and value them for who they are. So I think it's a matter of supporting the churches that do and calling out the churches that don't.
I think that's an excellent point, just because I think students who are in Catholic churches and, kind of learn that, perhaps they're not out yet, but are being taught that who they think they might be is really bad. For them to know that they can have their faith and be authentic to
Definitely.
themselves.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah, I think that's really such an important point, because I think that is what really makes it such a struggle for so many in the community who, believe in God and believe in, the charity that goes with that and all of the whatever Christian tenets. But, on the other hand, are told that who they are is, can't be a part of that. So I think that is so important that you do acknowledge those churches who are accepting. And I know there are many
Yes.
terrific churches out there who are very accepting. So, oh, wow. So anyway, so awesome work that you're doing to support that. We really have to nurture the young people. And I think that I've worked with LGBTQ clubs here. I sit on a school board, and so I sit on the club at the high school, and and it is like they're like, what, like what is the problem? And it's like they just don't get it. It's like, you don't understand. There's some problem. What? I don't,
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's great that you're in the mix with the young people and helping them really find their voice to go forward. So, okay, so let's talk about this other issue in education. Okay, this is just mind blowing what is happening. Some organizations at the national level, I have finally kind of concluded that all of this is rooted in an attempt to defer attention from other things, from climate change, from economic recovery in the country. So that's my final conclusion on all this. But what it is apparently is this huge kind of created illusion that there's some horrible thing going on in schools. And at first it wasn't LGBTQ people, even though I did see it in the documents when I first started looking into this. But it was, it was just, you're not teaching academics, you're teaching, racial, I don't know what, CRTs, what they call it. It's just such a misnomer and an illusion of an issue. But that's where it started. It was, oh, you're trying to, tell white children that they're responsible for slavery. Nobody teaches that. And so anyway, but then the truth comes out. It's more than that. It's not just LGBTQ issues, it's reproductive rights. And I did kind of, pick up on that pretty early, but tell us what you know, tell us what's happening and how we can, address this.
Well, the group is called Purple for Parents. Indiana is the one that we're keeping an eye on, obviously. And they have sent around a non-consent form, I believe they're calling it, for parents to sign to ask that their children not be in any education that is supported by or uses the work of a number of organizations: Planned Parenthood, the Kinsey Institute, Indiana Youth Group. We made the list. I take it as a badge of honor that we're doing work that people recognize. So we're also on that list. And it's very unfortunate because school is a place to learn. It's a place to learn views that are different than what you might hear at home. It's not a place to be indoctrinated. So I think it's unfortunate that these parents are going down this path, only wanting their children to hear one point of view. But I think from what I've seen, the school boards are, for the most part, standing pretty strong, saying that no, children should learn the true history of America, not the whitewashed version. Children should learn about sexual orientation and gender identity, that not everybody is cis and straight. Because we know statistically, not all those students are cis and straight. So they need to see themselves in instruction and in books in the library and in discussions in the classroom. So I think it's going to be a continuing long-term fight. I think when same-sex marriage became legal, that was a huge loss to this group. And so now they've moved on to the next thing. Like, okay, we lost that battle. Where's the next war we can wage? And it is on LGBTQ and youth of color. Unfortunately, those students are so marginalized, and especially the intersection of, Black youth of color or Black LGBTQ youth are just in a horrible position because they're being hit from every side. So I think it's important that as community members, we stand up and support those youth and support all youth in schools. So it's going to be a long-term fight, but I think people are becoming aware of it, and I think most people are on the right side of the fight.
I think you're right too. I think that's what's so interesting about that, is that an overwhelming majority of Americans are on the side of inclusion. So it feels so bizarre to hear this kind of, just loud voices, but I don't think many voices. So like I said, I sit on a school board, so I'm always bracing myself for what might be coming. I watch, I keep tabs on what's happening in other places, and just in case. And part of that, the opt out or form that you mentioned is also the call to action is to bring your kid to school a half an hour late and say, my child's here late because I didn't want any part of your SEL, which is social emotional learning. And it's just such nonsense. And I will tell you, and this sounds a little cynical, but I don't mean it that way. But, the fact is, schools didn't want to do all this. They didn't want to be, the army that helps children through all these social, events, even though I come from early childhood education stuff. So I do believe in all of that. But K-12, they never really wanted to be part of that. But that's who ends up doing it. And just like the services you provide, somebody has to be out there to help all of the students in all of their diverse needs. And so that's how I believe schools, came to that position. So, okay, so tell me, let's say, okay, next legislative session, what are your priorities? What are your priority issues? What are the things you think are most important to look at and to work on?
Well, we're always advocating for youth experiencing homelessness. So we will continue to do that. Conversion therapy is something that's still legal in Indiana that we push against. We know it's, it literally causes suicide ideation. So we lose youth to conversion therapy every year. So making that topic a point of conversation in the legislature. I know we have a long way to go before we can probably get anything passed, but just bringing it up and talking with legislators and their constituents over and over about the harm that conversion therapy causes, I think is something that we will continue doing. And then obviously funding for education and broad education, not just the education we currently have. So funding GSAs, funding teachers to run a GSA. A lot of the teachers do that now on a volunteer basis, which I don't think is fair, and it makes it tough to get an advisor to run a GSA. So just really pushing to make sure that LGBTQ students are supported as much as the football team is, or the basketball team. Those are all clubs, and all clubs should be supported equally.
That's great. And I do want to point out that I was really heartened to see the Pride events that popped up all over the state, and in many places for the first time. And of course, were, well attended and a great fun. And if, I'm sure you've been to Pride events, but just it's a love fest, and it's just the most delightful feeling to be at those Pride fests. And all the students who were able to attend those events and really feel that acceptance and love was really heartening for me this summer. So that was a good thing. It's nice to mention the good things.
Yeah, a lot of time it's the first time that young people have felt that support in a public atmosphere, because unfortunately, most LGBTQ spaces are bars. And, the younger people can't access those. So that's a lot of times the only public LGBTQ space they might be in a year. So that's really important for the young people.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so tell us, what people can do. We want to support this cause. We want to support your organization. How can people reach you and support you?
The best way to reach us is through our website at indianayouthgroup.org. If you want to volunteer, there's a button there you can hit to volunteer. We're actually running virtual IYG. When the pandemic hit, we started a virtual IYG. It offers all the programs that we offer in person. So we have about 200 youth that are signed up through virtual IYG. So you can volunteer virtually to be a mentor or to teach a hobby that you do. We have knitting classes. We have discussion groups. There's a Dungeons and Dragons group. There's opportunities to volunteer even if you're not in Indianapolis. Obviously, supporting us monetarily is great. You can also, when you get your license plate, order an IYG license plate, which supports us monetarily, which is great. But even more important, gives the youth in your community something to see that, oh, look, that person supports queer people. And to some youth, that's the only time they'll see that. So that's really important to have that on your bumper, to say, I am supportive. It's a way you can say it to everybody without having to say anything. So those are some ways.
As adults, I just think, we just don't appreciate how important those little signals are. We've heard of teachers who put, a rainbow flag on their classroom and how that's become controversial. And it feels so strange to have to put, some kind of secret signal out there to identify a safe space for students and young people who are LGBTQ and, need someone to talk to.
Yeah, and that's, where IYG came from. We started as a secret club because it wasn't safe to be out. And so we still want to provide those cues that this is a safe space, or I am a safe person. Even if they're not loud and proud, just those little tokens can be the difference between a youth feeling secure or not.
Yeah, I've worked with young women in middle school and, worked on creating safe space. And when there is that safe space and someone can come out and say, I have questions, or I really believe that, I may not be a cis straight, and they can talk about it. I mean, you can just see the burden falling off their shoulders. And and it's a wonderful thing. So I encourage all adults just to make some connection, so that youth have a place to go.
Yeah, we know if a youth has one supportive adult, it reduces their chance of attempting suicide by 8 times. So just being that one person, you can literally save lives.
Wow. And it's, and it's great fun. Who doesn't have fun, just hanging out with kids, and they're great. They're fun. They have a lot of energy.
Lots of energy.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for chatting with me. These are such important issues, and I'm so honored to talk to you and get those issues out there and learn so much from you. So
thanks for having me, Deb. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Until next time.
Bye.